last times we talked about like this. I asked you for a way to come down into body. And you talked about this exercise where you put one hand on top of the other. And then you think about letting one hand actually be held by the other.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was a really good exercise for coming down out of your head. And I feel like I just see myself and others like stuck in that pattern all the time. And that like the tendency is to like go up in there and like be there with people. And it just like feeds each other's anxiety to an extent. And I just wanted to know if you had any other tricks for that. Do you remember the thing I'm talking about?
Yeah. But say tricks as far as that. What is that exactly?
That is like it's like the feeling where you're a balloon extended from your body, like being taken for a ride by everything around you. And it feels like I see myself doing that, and I see other people doing that all the time. Like if I'm up there and like totally looking out from there, do you find like, okay, hanging out with this friend of ours on Sunday, and it just seems like he can't get out of that. That kind of like
aloof,
just up in your head. Yeah. Like blasting out, not really connected to like what he's actually feeling. So I guess what I'm starting to wonder is like, how do you, in these same ways that like you can try to help yourself, is there part of this is like how you show up for other people? And it's more in like a personal relational way. Well, I mean, it's a relational approach, but I'm not really looking at like not trying to be therapeutic, but just like being aware of both what's helpful in that situation, being aware of like something they're going through, seeing it, how it impacts you. Is there a way to show up that's like good for both of you?
Well, I guess the way I'd answer that. So when you use your conscious attention, you can see, so to speak, where the other person is orienting, where they're anchoring, and what they're identifying as. And then there's where are you orienting? Where are you anchoring? How are you identifying? And when you bring your conscious attention to where they're at, they're going to start getting more conscious there. So you can go find them. So to use the language I tend to use, it's like, what dimension are they in? And bring your attention to that dimension. For example, bring your attention there, but then simultaneously anchor in a different place. So it's like, let's say someone's being silly. They're just in kind of a little bit of a manic thing, or they just got the giggles, or they won't be serious, and you're trying to be serious. So then you might just sit there and refuse to meet them in the silliness, and you're just coming from this like stoic place or this angry place, and you're just like letting them feel the fact that you're not resonating, right? And then they might say, okay, sorry, and they might get more serious. Or you might kind of go meet them, okay, have a joke or two about it, but then try to bring it back. And so we're always doing this where we're shifting self states, and we're shifting states of mind, and we're shifting where we're anchoring. So again, it's like, well, if you can be anchored in, let's say, your personal self, and you're trying to help someone else get down into their personal self, you can bring your attention to both their personal self that they aren't being in touch with, right? Which is the same thing as looking at their foot and paying attention to their foot, even if they aren't paying attention to their foot.
Mm.
And if you simultaneously pay attention consciously to where they are at, and then also pay attention to this other place in them, you act as a bridge or as a circuit, and they literally start to become aware of both.
Mm. I like that you described it as like paying attention to something physical. It's like paying attention to a foot.
Yeah.
It can be disconnected from it in the exact same way.
Right. And, well, should we try an experiential?
Sure.
So if we just talk chakras for a second, it feels like you're in touch with your third chakra. You're in touch with your intellect. And you're you're orienting consciously. Now, when I say that, it's to a certain degree, et cetera, et cetera.
Don't ask any follow-up questions about it.
Exactly. So I'm seeing that, feeling that, intuiting that. And then, for example...
Can I ask a question before we get too far into it? Because I think part of even of what you just...
Right after you said don't ask any follow-up questions.
Yeah. That was of me and my conscious attending. Because when you talked about seeing where someone's identifying and anchoring from, I know that's a huge part of what you do. And we could do it after we go through the experiential. But you describing like what you notice in identifying those things. It's kind of like the how of that, or the what you're seeing.
I mean, that's why I was saying intuiting, feeling.
For sure.
Because it's hard to explain.
Okay.
But by way of analogy, I'd say when you can sense that, okay, the person you're talking to isn't being present, like when someone says, I feel like you're not here right now. It's like, well, how are you sensing that?
Okay.
Right. There's a sense of it, or I feel like, okay, you're just like mentalizing, but if it feels like you have feelings about this that you're not really saying, and like you're not even feeling them yourself. Or it could be you seem really pissed, but you're trying to act like you're not. So maybe they are aware of them, but they're not. They're trying to not express them with you.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do we get all this information? And I would say, well, it's because we primarily experience via fields, right? Energy centers that put out fields.
Yeah.
And we're gathering all this information via these fields. And like we've talked about before, we tend to interpret it all into concepts.
Right.
But the feelers are out there, and we're taking in the info, and we get it's one of those things where when you look at language, there's a lot of phrases that sort of make it obvious that we're intuiting these things, or someone will say holding space, and it's like, well, what do what? That's just like a silly couple of words, right?
Right.
Like, what the hell is holding space? That doesn't even make any sense. But people know what that means. They use it, whether they've ever heard of it the way I'm talking about it. It's like they use that term.
Yeah.
We all are tracking this with people as far as, like even someone that's really in a narcissistic state, and even kind of especially sometimes a person that's in a real narcissistic state, they can seem like they're absolutely oblivious to the other people in the room, right? As far as like what is the other actually paying attention to, right? You can get that feeling where it's like, man, I think if I got up and walked out of the room, I'm not sure this person would even know that it happened, right?
Right.
But if you even alter your breath a little bit, they notice. It's like, no, they're actually hyper attuned to, are you paying exclusive attention to me right now or not? So it can be real deceiving as far as what we're tracking, what it seems like others are tracking versus not, Some people you can think, man, I don't think that person even knew I was at the party. And then later that person's like, hey, you seem kind of
you ate too many nuts.
Down. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, we're drawing this stuff in, and not necessarily all via words or via eye contact, right?
For something that you said is difficult to explain, I thought that was a great explanation.
Okay, good. So I said, okay, you're in your intellect as always, and which is good. That's not a critique. I'm not sure what the Jeff who's not in his intellect looks like. It's probably not good.
Bordering on dangerous.
Yeah. But and obviously I know this is your pattern a little bit, but this is what's showing up in my awareness is okay, there's a lot of energy, a lot of action happening up in the head and above. And you're able to stay grounded into your third chakra enough to not just get manic. But I can feel that one of the ways you're doing that is by constricting in the thoracic nerve area. So the upper chest, lower neck area. And if I was going to help you anchor...
Is that like base of the neck, or where is that?
Yeah, right. So if I was going to help you anchor, let's say, lower than that. Okay, so now I'm bringing my attention to your chest area, but I'm also still paying attention to your head and above. And it's kind of like if I was making eye contact with you, but I was saying, Jeff, look at your foot, right? So I'm looking at you in your eyes, but I'm also paying attention to your foot, and I'm going, look down at your foot. It's like I'm doing that, only I'm finding you up above your head, and I'm saying, Jeff, feel your chest. Now, of course, I'm saying it verbally to you, so you're following that cue. But even if I didn't say that, that's what I'm doing with my attention. And then in doing so, I'm feeling vibratory stuff that, is in the way. So it makes me want to breathe like that. I feel a certain amount of defensive, chaotic energy.
Yeah, it feels kind of black to me.
And then do you feel how, okay, your attention's starting to come down out of that higher place, which wasn't necessarily the goal, but that's just going to be a phase here.
Right.
But do you feel that now, like your mental space is a little darker than it was?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay. But you're starting to get in your body more.
Right. Just feel my shoulders and arms in a different way.
Yeah. Okay, so if you think of you've contacted body more, if you just intentionally anchor your attention there, which again would be like if you're riding a bike and your attention started to wander too much, and then it's like, whoa, shit, I almost, fell over on my bike. I got to get back.
Right.
Paying it, or the road's getting a little bumpier, so I got to pay a little more attention to physical reality here for a second. So if you anchor like that, but then simultaneously include that higher self consciousness, soul awareness. There you go. And then notice that okay, the pathway between the two goes through the base of the neck, it goes through the face and head. And you got to go a little bit, I can see that in order to do that, you're having to go into more of an open mind, kind of blank ego mind state.
Right.
And so, okay, your mind is now doing less interrupting soul's connection to body, but you're a bit dissociated mentally.
Right. Right.
But notice you could sit and just allow soul to just kind of trickle down into body, and that would be good. But if you got to be really sharp mentally right now,
this isn't the place for it.
Yeah, this isn't the mode to be in. So notice, it's like, well, why? What's in the way? Like, do you have to leave body and soul in order to get real sharp mentally? It's like, well, you wouldn't think that would have to happen. So while staying in this state, notice, well, what's in the way? And I think what you'll notice is what is the typical thing, which is that, well, but your ego mind, it's like your ego mind's like, the only way I'm getting in this car is if I get to drive. And it's like, no, your ego mind's being invited in to ride shotgun or ride in the back seat. And you feel the ego mind's, well, fuck you, then I'm out.
Right. It's like a lack of trust.
But if you just sit and hold space for that and just allow that, okay, the ego mind's not quite, it doesn't quite want to just surrender to this flow, but you hold it, you mirror, or you witness it, you hold it. You might need to contain it. There you go. So I can feel that it just came online more. You also went deeper in your intellect.
Became a little more focused. It was kind of like a hazy cloud kind of. It was like something ego was trying to like pierce through before to like take control and drive, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel how you're more in the interior of your mind now?
Yeah.
And so to be clear, there's soul, but then there's the interior of your mind, which are different. And ideally, soul energy comes down into the interior of your mind.
It's a very different felt experience. There weren't really words in that previous spot. It was hard to talk about what was going on, or harder.
So you feel how that deeper space in your mind, there's just deeper truth there.
Mm.
And to sit in there and then listen to a bunch of superficial truth is just kind of annoying. Meaning if real relative truths are being espoused as though they were absolutes, there's just this knowing that, like, well, that's not an absolute truth. In other words, your mind isn't willing to just be thrown around now by the social current. Like I can feel if I was going to try to sell you something right now, it'd be tough. Meaning if I was going to try to sort of manipulate you or pull you out of your sense of what's what and make you think you need to buy this product that I'm selling or something. Like you feel how you're in that mode of, it's the same kind of place someone goes when they're talking to someone and then they come to realize that, oh, the person's lying. And you just kind of drop back into this place of like, no, you're totally lying right now. Like you're full of shit. You kind of feel that?
Yeah, it's like it's not skepticism. It's
no. It's a knowing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to say the word boundary though. Like it feels like there's it's like acceptance that it's not true, or like that whatever's being presented isn't true, but it's not like a judgment of that.
Yeah.
It's like a determination. It's like a knowing, like you're saying, but it's not like whatever that thing being presented is still feels close at hand, but it's not being taken as true. It's not like you're lying and I think you're bad.
Right.
Right.
Okay, but now in addition, bring your personality in. Whatever you think that word means. And you feel how that is kind of difficult?
Well, yeah, I mean, it feels like mania to an extent.
Yeah. And do you feel how, well, that is going to bring skepticism? That is going to bring judgment?
It colors it immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. Colors it. That's a good word.
So what's that in relation to the interior mind that you're talking about, the interior of your mind versus personality or alongside personality?
Say again, what's the question about it?
I guess like what's that typical relationship there between personality and the interior of the mind?
I mean, for most people, they're quite separate, which is unfortunate. But when you bring them together, it's hard because this deeper place is it calls bullshit on your own personality just like it calls bullshit on everyone else's.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's part of the awakening process. But so when you can allow that, okay, that personality place is, just that it is what it is, it's this conditional place. So just as far as an example, I was watching, you know who Michael Rappaport is?
Yeah.
He was on the Dan Patrick show podcast, but he's Rappaport. You know how Rappaport's always like ranting?
Yeah.
Like no matter.
That's his shtick. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's never said a word that wasn't in rant mode.
Yeah.
But he was going off on a thing and I won't even say what he was talking about, but he's all heated up and he's like, and then this, and then that gets brought into it. And then people are so fucking, they're just being babies and they're like needing to be offended about every last thing. And so then this happens and blah, blah, blah. And then Dan Patrick, finally is like, okay, but why do you let it bother you so much? And he's like, I'm not bothered by it. And Dan Patrick's like, well, you seem a little bothered right now.
Yeah.
And Rappaport's like, Dan, don't flatter yourself. This is just how I am. And then he like stands up and he starts sort of like fist bumping and like bumping and grinding. And you could tell, like, 1 second he seemed like he was just angrier than hell, but at the same time, he's completely like having fun,
Yeah.
But it's sort of that. It's like Rappaport is totally doing this personality. Like, I'm super pissed. I'm super affected. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. This is bullshit. And then simultaneously, to enough of a degree, it was like, but this is just my shtick.
Yeah, pulled his own mask off.
Yeah, right. But what was funny is he didn't shift out of it.
Yeah.
It was just like, no, this is
what it is.
And it was like, and believe me, I'm staying in this. It wasn't like, okay, I'll come out of it. It was like, no, don't flatter yourself. I'm always in this. I'm staying in this.
Yeah. You don't want to see what actually bothers me.
Yeah, right.
This is the stuff I don't care about.
Yeah. But, and it's like in general, I think Dan Patrick is more caught in his personality than Rappaport is. Mm-hmm. Or at least in that moment was my sense that, that Dan Patrick was like, no, I'm doing, he was coming from his personality in a way where it's like, I'm being, however he is. Like he's talking about this stuff and he's trying to be insightful and he's trying to have kind of a voice of reason and he's having a discussion about it. And, and it's like, okay, that's all, in general, that's all good stuff, but it's also limited and it's also not really holding space for what Rappaport was holding space for, which was, because to my view, Rappaport was making a good point about something. Yeah. And was calling bullshit on something. And Dan Patrick was taking the like PC line and trying to say, this or that in a very calculated manner. And there's a place for calculated, articulate PC language. Yeah. But the very nature of that podcast is supposed to be the kind of thing where you can, where you can have this discussion about it that isn't a political speech that you're giving because you're trying to get elected. Right. And so he sort of frustrates me in general, but I like people going on there that aren't doing that kind of, so then he and them kind of run into each other. Yeah. So he's holding this affective space of like, it's crazy and it's bullshit and it's angering and it's like not okay. Yeah. And Dan Patrick's like, but why do you let it bother you? And it's like, fuck you. Yeah. Is sort of, is
it's just undercutting.
Is one response that you could have is like, fuck you, Dan. Like, come off you're so above this. Because I think you probably agree with him in general, but you need to walk this certain line. Right. And you're going to say, why does it bother you? Which is to sort of downcast Rappaport that he's like being immature about it. And it's like, no, I think he's actually being more honest, more open, more mature, and more willing to fucking speak about it. Yeah. But it can look very deceiving because it looks like Rappaport's just having a childish tantrum. Right. Which is what I loved when, it's part of why I love that in the midst of it, without even coming out of his tantrum, tells Dan Patrick, don't flatter yourself. I don't know why the term don't flatter yourself is so funny, but it just sort of, it's like a funny phrase to use.
For sure. Yeah, because it's like, don't quarantine me. Yeah. And like what you think I'm doing. Yeah. You're not even meeting me where I'm at. Right. It's like, I think it's like that boundary thing I'm talking about. If you're drawing the boundary between you and the other person or around the two of you, And that even if you're within that same thing, it doesn't mean that you're the same person.
Right.
Doesn't mean that like you believe and think the same things. But what the other person's going to share, you're not separating yourself from. So it's not like a merge, but it's just like acknowledging the field instead of trying to divide it.
Yeah, and that bringing it back to like what are the terms that we were when because you were talking about latency.
Yeah.
This idea of for example, collapsing a field into a waveform, right?
Yeah.
Is my understanding in quantum physics, you have this quantum state field, but there's a thing that can happen that has something to do with two things with a similar wave frequency or amplitude or something. Something happens that causes a collapse into a waveform. Do you have an understanding of that?
Oh, no, I think that's a different, I'm not sure.
What's the guy's name on the Rogan podcast where he just like looks the shit up real quick?
I can't remember. I know what you're talking about.
Something like that. In quantum mechanics, wave function collapse occurs when a wave function, initially in a superposition of several eigenstates, reduces to a single eigenstate due to interaction with the external world. This interaction is called an observation. So at some point I read that. I don't know what the fucking eigenstate is, but when I first sort of heard the idea and then I looked it up and read that probably, again, it was one of those things where it was like, oh my God, that's exactly how I see it energetically.
Yeah.
That there's this observation or a perception, an interaction with the external world, and a person's mind, one of the things a person's mind can do, like I was talking about grounding the other day, is it can collapse it into a single eigenstate and go, oh, okay, it's this. And it's like, okay, maybe that's a thing you can do. You can, whatever, if you're saying certain stuff and then I go, oh, okay, Jeff is a X. It's like, well, then I've collapsed it into a waveform in my mind.
Wow.
Like Jeff's an asshole, or Jeff's a genius, or Jeff's a racist, or Jeff's really tired right now, or, you know, and these are just ideas, concepts.
Pretty accurate.
But it's like, okay, or not. Like, it's not an absolute truth.
Right.
I mean, it's actually, it's literally an intellectual defense.
Yeah.
Which is to just take the stuff and make it a certain concept, and then that's it. And now all the ambiguity, all the doubt, all the various options and various views go away because it's this.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why do we do that? Well, one of the reasons is because to not do that, you're left in this, you know, you're left with this chaos. You're left with ambiguity and openness and doubt and there you can't grab. And so it can just leave you in anxiety unless you can, for example, ground in your conscious mind, because your conscious mind has no problem with that open field.
Right.
And then to bring that personality thing and the way I'm using personality is it's like personality is like a character. When you go to play a video game and it's like, okay, well, which little icon are you, right? And it's like, well, you're that, you know, like I've said before, like you sit down to play Pac-Man. And it's like, well, here's the deal, Jeff. You're that little yellow circular thing, you know, with a mouth. And then you're going to move around this maze and you can't let those little ghost things get you. And boom, you can go right into it. And suddenly you're having like intense emotions because holy shit, the thing almost got you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's happening? It's like, well, you've done a thing in your mind where you're now that character. You're that personality. The words are trickier. I'm wanting, because I've talked about the difference between character and personality in psychology, and I'm talking about personality right now. But when you use the video game, the idea would be that little Pac-Man is your personality. Mm-hmm. The way you play Pac-Man, how aggressively, how fearfully, would be your Jeff's character, right? So the words are kind of flipped there. But what I'm getting at is we do this in our mind. You watch a movie and you identify with a character, and then you're like, okay, and we don't usually have this thought in our head, but we're like, okay, I'm that guy, or I'm her, or I'm that dog, or I'm,
Right.
And then you take the ride, and you feel the excitement or the fear or that the character's experiencing. And the idea is, okay, we do this with ourselves. We create a character, and it's so funny the way electronics and all this work. It's like, what's it called, a Bitmoji, where you have your little
do little personal emojis with you.
Right. It's like that's personality in our mind, right? We've created a little thing like that in our minds, and then that little character is doing life, right? Like the video game is life, and we're having that little character do life. And that's great, and it's fun, and it's a certain kind of communication, and it's a certain kind of creativity, and it's a certain kind of experience. But the thing with awakening and all that is, okay, but it's not real. You got to remember, it's not real.
Yeah, right.
It's just a character you've created. And it's not even about the qualities of the personality. It's that the personality itself is a thing it's a construct that you've invested in and perhaps even become identified with.
If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.